was visiting my family for the holidays last year, and since they live 15 hours away, I usually try to push through the entire drive in one long stretch. But the snow came in early and slowed every mile, so I knew I would have to stop somewhere along the way. I did not book a hotel in advance because I was not sure how far I would get before I could not keep my eyes open anymore. When I first left home, it was barely snowing, but the farther out I drove, the heavier the snow fell. And even though the roads were still drivable, everyone was moving slower than usual. By the time I hit 8 hours, I still was not even halfway there, and it was already 9 at night. I felt frustrated and tired, and kept telling myself I needed to get at least a little farther so the next day would not feel impossible. The snow finally eased up a bit, but it had already built up on the road since no plows had come through. I kept driving as long as I could, pushing until midnight before I finally accepted I needed sleep. I pulled off at the next exit and turned into a small motel parking lot. It was a long single-story building with maybe 10 rooms, the kind of place you only stop at because you are too tired to keep going. The sign was old with half the bulbs burned out, and the outside looked worn from years of storms. I parked near the rooms and walked into the little front office, but saw a sign on the desk propped against a coffee cup that said, "Be back in 15." The timing felt almost comical after the drive I had. I walked back to my car, and that was when I noticed something I had somehow missed before. The entire parking lot was empty, not one car, not one set of tire tracks showing someone had been there earlier in the night. I sat in my car with the heater on and tried to convince myself the worker was just on a break, but the more I thought about it, the stranger it felt. There were no stores or gas stations within 15 minutes of that exit, so where would they have even gone? I leaned back for just a moment to rest my eyes, and without meaning to, I passed out. When I woke up, the wind was shaking my car and the snow was coming down hard again. I sat up straight, still half asleep, and looked toward the motel office. That was when I saw him. A man standing right outside my window, staring in at me. I jerked back in shock as he stepped away and yelled something toward the parking lot. My stomach knotted as I looked past him and saw a truck parked in the shadows on the far side of the lot. Another man got out and started walking straight toward my car. The first man circled around me, pulling on the door handles one by one. I snapped out of my panic and threw the car into reverse, trying to back out, but the wheels spun uselessly in the thick snow. The men were moving faster now, one yelling at the other to help him break the back window. Before I could react, the glass shattered behind me, snow and shards spraying across the back seat. One of the men reached his arm inside, trying to grab the door handle. I kept rocking the car back and forth, fighting the snow, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. When he leaned halfway through the broken window, I finally got enough traction to jerk the car forward. He fell back into the snow, and I spun the car around toward the exit. I saw them rush toward their truck as I hit the gas and tore out of the lot, sliding a little before the tires caught the road. They tried to follow me, but once I hit the main highway, their headlights faded into the storm behind me. I drove for miles before I even slowed down. Looking back, I know I never should have fallen asleep in a dark, empty parking lot in the middle of nowhere. Those men were clearly waiting for someone to slip up, someone tired and alone on a holiday night. I still think about what would have happened if I had woken up just 1 minute later. It was Christmas Eve, the kind of bitter cold where the air stings your face and every breath feels like smoke in the dark. Snow had piled up against the sides of our small house at the edge of town, and the whole world outside looked frozen in place. Inside, though, things were supposed to feel warm and peaceful, or at least that was what Mom kept trying to make happen. I was sitting on the carpet by the fireplace, flipping through a worn-out comic book I had read a dozen times, just trying to keep my mind off everything. My little sister Layla was pressed against the window, fogging up the glass as she kept staring out into the night like she was waiting for someone to appear out of the shadows. "Do you think Dad will come this time?" she asked, voice soft and hopeful. I could hear the bravery in her question, but there was fear in it too. I wanted so badly to tell her yes, to make her smile, but Dad had promised things like that before, and he had let us down more times than I could count. "You know how busy he gets," I said without looking up. It felt easier to lie if I stayed focused on the comic. She did not answer. She just kept staring outside like something out there was pulling her attention. Mom called me over to steady a chair while she tried to hang a piece of tinsel at the top of the tree. Her hands were shaking from how tired she was, and even though she tried to joke about the tree looking better every minute, I could tell she was forcing the cheer. The decorations were homemade, the lights flickered, and the branches were uneven, but she kept smiling like she was determined to make this one night work. Dinner was quiet, almost too quiet. Mom kept trying to ask us little questions about school, and Lila kept drifting back into her thoughts. I stayed mostly silent, listening to the clock tick in the background. It felt like the house was holding its breath. Around 7, Mom grabbed her coat and told us she had to pick up Grandma. "Michael, you are in charge," she said. "Lock the doors, and do not open them for anyone." She hugged Layla, then paused, as if there was something she wanted to say but stopped herself. "If Dad comes," Layla said, "should I tell him to wait?" Mom hesitated just a second too long. "If he comes, he will have to wait," she said, then left into the night. The moment the door closed, the house felt different, like the warm air had slipped out with her. An hour passed. Lila kept pacing between the window and the Christmas tree while I tried to convince her to watch a movie, but she was too restless. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. Almost polite. My whole body went cold. Lila lit up instantly. "It is Dad," she whispered, already rushing to the door. "Lila, wait!" I reached for her, but she slipped past me, her hand already on the knob. When she pulled the door open, a man stood there wearing a Santa suit, but everything about him felt wrong. The suit was wrinkled and stained, the beard slightly crooked, and the smile on his face was too stiff, like it was held in place. Snow stuck to his shoulders and boots, and he stood there in our yellow porch light, like he had been waiting for that door to open all night. "Ho, ho, ho," he said, but his voice had no cheer in it at all. "Not quite Dad," he added when Layla blinked up at him, "but I brought surprises." "Mom said not to let anyone in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped 1 foot inside without waiting for permission, brushing past me like I barely existed. A damp, strange smell clung to him, the kind that makes your stomach twist. He set his sack by his feet, and it hit the floor heavier than I expected. "For you," he said to Layla, pulling out a porcelain doll with glassy eyes that seemed to stare right through the room. Layla hugged it, smiling like the world suddenly made sense again. "And for you," he said, reaching into the sack again. I stepped back. "I really do not need anything," I whispered. But he held out a small wooden box, the lid closed tight. "Open it and see," he said, his smile stretching wider. Before I could move, the lights in the house flickered hard and shut off, throwing us into complete darkness. Lila screamed as the room vanished around us. I fumbled for the flashlight on the mantel, hands shaking. When the beam finally cut across the room, it hit the man first. He was standing perfectly still, eyes fixed on us, smile frozen in place. "Let us play a holiday game," he said softly. My pulse spiked. "You need to go now," I said. He did not move. Instead, he took 1 slow step toward us, and the floor creaked under his weight. I grabbed Lila's hand and whispered, "Run." We slipped across the cold floor toward the back of the house, the sounds of his heavy steps following close behind us. The air felt thick with fear, the kind that makes it hard to breathe. We burst out the back door into the snow and sprinted toward the woods, our breaths sharp and fast in the freezing night. When we hit the tree line and turned back, he was standing in the yard, framed by the house lights flickering faintly behind him. "You cannot hide forever," he called out, his voice echoing through the trees. We ran deeper until the branches blurred around us. We crawled inside a hollow tree, shaking, trying to stay quiet. I held Lila close and whispered that it was okay, even though my hands would not stop trembling. The night dragged on. At one point I heard distant bells, low and slow, drifting through the woods. Not cheerful bells. Bells that felt like they were calling out to someone, or something. Then, just as dawn finally touched the snow and the light crept across the woods, I heard his voice again, drifting through the trees like it was right beside us. "Merry Christmas." It started like any other Christmas, or at least the kind of Christmas I had grown used to, cold, bleak, and full of reminders that I was stuck in a place that never felt like home. It was not the weather or the isolation of our tiny cabin in the woods. It was who was inside it, my dad. I woke up to the kind of silence you only get when snow falls thick and heavy and every sound outside is swallowed. The cabin groaned from the weight of the storm, and even under the blanket I could feel the cold bite at my face. When I dragged myself out of bed and caught my reflection in the mirror, the bruise on my cheek had already turned a deep, dark purple. I did not need to relive the moment to understand how it happened. My father had left another mark on me. He had not always been like this. Before my mom passed, he used to sing Christmas songs completely off-key and laugh when he forgot the words. Back then, he would try to make holidays feel warm even when we were broke. But after she died, he changed. Most days, he barely got off the couch unless it was to grab another bottle. I muttered a quiet Merry Christmas to my reflection and pulled on the warmest clothes I had, though the cabin never felt warm enough. When I walked downstairs, he was right where I knew he would be lying on the couch, half awake with an empty bottle next to him. I stepped around him, grabbed a piece of toast, and tried to ignore the stale, heavy smell that always filled the house. My phone buzzed. "Uncle Jerk." His voice came through loud and warm. "Lucas, Merry Christmas. I am on my way, got a surprise for you, so stay put." For the first time that day I smiled. He was the only person left who made Christmas feel even close to normal. He always brought something incredible from his travels, and every year it felt like he brought a little bit of the world to me. After hanging up, I decided to decorate the cabin before he arrived and maybe make it feel a little less empty. I headed out into the woods where the snow crunched loudly under my boots, and the air stung my face in a way that felt strangely refreshing. It did not take long to find a good tree, tall, full, and perfect. Dragging it back to the cabin nearly froze my fingers off, but I managed to set it up in the corner. I was catching my breath when the front door slammed open and my dad stormed in. He saw the tree and scoffed. "Waste of time," he muttered, pulling on his coat and heading back out, saying he was going to the tavern. I did not stop him. There was nothing left to say. I turned my attention to decorating the tree with the old ornaments we had collected over the years, chipped, faded, and mismatched, but each one carrying some kind of memory. By the time Uncle Jerk arrived, the place actually felt a little closer to home. He walked in with an armful of bags, laughing like he could fill the whole cabin with his voice alone. For a while it worked. We ate dinner, he brought real turkey, and it felt like a real holiday for the first time in years. We talked about his travels, and he told me that once I turned 18, he planned to help me leave that cabin for good. I did not realize how much I needed to hear that until he said it. After dinner, the storm got worse. Snow slapped against the windows, and the wind pushed at the cabin like it wanted inside. We were sitting by the fire talking when someone knocked on the door. Both of us froze. Nobody ever came here, especially not during a storm like that. When he opened the door, no one was there. Just a small box wrapped neatly in red paper with a shiny gold ribbon. "Do you know anything about this?" he asked. I shook my head and opened it. Inside was another box, and then another, and another, until the last one rested in my hands, small and cold. Inside was something that made my breath catch, something shaped like a finger but with no details that could be shown on screen. A small folded note sat next to it with a name I had not heard in years, Ma Novak. She had been a bully who made my life miserable in grade school. "We need to call the police," Jerk said. But before he could grab his phone, there was another knock. The second box was larger and heavier, and when I opened it, I felt sick. It held something shaped like an ear, but again without clear details, and another note this time, with the name Victor, a man who had evicted us after my mom died. The storm screamed against the walls, and the fire crackled behind us. My hand shook as I opened the third box, bigger this time, and inside was a shape the size of a small foot wrapped in cloth, with my father's name written on a slip of paper. Before either of us could speak, the lights went out. The cabin dropped into darkness, except for the glow of the fire. I heard it then, faint, steady crunching in the snow, someone walking toward the door, slow and deliberate. Jerk grabbed the fireplace poker and motioned for me to stay still. The steps stopped right outside. My heart hammered in my chest. The door creaked open an inch, then another inch, but no one stepped inside. There was only a shadow in the storm holding another box. We stared, frozen, unable to move, until the figure turned away and walked back into the whiteout, disappearing like smoke. The police never figured out who it was. Days later, they found my dad wandering on the roadside, confused, frightened, and missing part of his leg, but alive. The others mentioned in the notes were not as fortunate, though the officers never released details. And every Christmas Eve since then, when the storm quiets and the night turns, still I swear I hear slow crunching footsteps in the snow outside the cabin, and I cannot help but wonder if one day the next box will have my name on it. I took on extra delivery shifts on weekends and on school days off, and this happened just a couple weeks before our holiday break. It was a Friday night, and I had nothing going on, so I figured I might as well make some money instead of sitting around the house doing nothing. I started driving, turned on the app, and waited for orders to come in. It was not snowing anymore, but the cold was sharp and the wind kept cutting across the road, and there was still a thin layer of old snow pushed into the corners from earlier in the day. I think it was around 6 when I got started, and after a few quick orders, I got one to pick up from a nearby Burger King. I grabbed the food, checked the map, and right away I could tell it was not a house address. When I zoomed in, it looked like the delivery spot was at the corner of 2 streets, possibly a gas station. It felt strange, but I hit begin route and drove over anyway. I honestly thought the worst part would be the awkward moment of handing the food to someone standing outside, because I almost never see customers in person. When I pulled up to the intersection, I saw the gas station sitting right where the app said it would be. It looked normal enough, but the parking lot was completely empty. I parked in one of the back spots and waited, keeping my headlights on so whoever ordered could see me. The app should have alerted them that I had arrived, so I thought someone would be walking out any second, but even after a couple minutes there was nobody. I sent a quick message through the app saying I was in the lot and waiting. Then, I stepped out of my car for a better look around. The whole intersection was dark and empty, no passing cars and no open stores. The longer I stood there in the quiet, the more uncomfortable I felt. I checked my phone again with still no response. I was cold, confused, and ready to just leave the order and go, and that was when a truck pulled into the gas station. It came in slow, past the pumps, and rolled toward me until it stopped only a couple spots away. It was an older dark red pickup with tinted windows, the kind of truck you almost never see on the road in good condition. My first thought was, why would someone order delivery if they were already out driving? At first I had assumed the customer worked inside or was waiting somewhere nearby, but now everything felt wrong. The driver door opened and a man stepped out. From the first second I saw him, something in my stomach tightened. He had a drained look, like someone who has not slept indoors in a long time, and his clothes were dirty, stained, and worn thin. I raised the bag of food and tried to smile, but he did not even glance at it. His eyes stayed on me, steady and flat, as he walked closer. Something in me reacted before my brain even caught up. I set the bag on the ground beside me, not because he asked, but because I suddenly felt like I needed both hands free. Almost the instant I did that, the man started walking faster with a direction in his steps that made my chest go tight. I backed toward my car, opened the door, and got inside right as he reached my window. He did not say anything. Instead, he ran back to his truck the second he saw me move. That was enough for me. I pulled out fast, drove over a patch of old snow, and headed toward the exit. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw his truck swing around and speed toward the same exit I was using. I pressed the accelerator harder than I ever have in my life and cut through a red light just to reach a busier road where more cars were. For a moment, his headlights stayed in view, and then they disappeared when he turned off toward another street. When I finally felt safe enough to breathe, I called the police and explained what happened, but nothing really came from it. In the chaos, I never thought to check for a plate, and honestly, I do not even know if the truck had one. I do not know what that man wanted, or what would have happened if I had stayed outside for even a few more seconds, but knowing how close I came to finding out still gives me a deep, cold feeling whenever I pull into an empty parking lot at night. It started like any other festive trip, and for a while it even felt peaceful. The kind of quiet winter drive where the kids argue about Christmas magic and the world outside your windshield looks soft and harmless. I was driving them home after a long day at my parents' new farmhouse deep in the countryside, a place so far from everything that even during the day it felt a little too removed from the rest of the world. Ellie, who was 5, was still fully convinced Santa was real, while Liam, who was 9, pretended he was too old for the stories, even though he still got caught up in the excitement. They were chatting in the back seat about presents and who was going to get what, their voices mixing with the hum of the heater until we saw it, a hand-painted sign on the side of the road that looked like it had been made in a rush Santa's winter wonderland 9 miles ahead. Ellie gasped so loud I jumped, and she begged to go while Liam said it might be fun if we were not in a hurry. I hesitated because the snow was coming down harder and the road felt slick, but Ellie hit me with the kind of hopeful look that makes you feel like you're taking something away from your kid if you say no, so I turned onto the path. Each sign we passed looked worse than the last letters, smudged crooked arrows leaning off the wood like whoever painted them was shaking or freezing or both. Then the trees thickened around us and the path narrowed until it barely felt wide enough for one car. Snowflakes tapped the windshield like static, and I kept glancing at the rear view mirror even though there was nothing behind us except darkness. When we finally arrived, the sight made my stomach drop because it did not look like any kind of wonderland. Half-dead Christmas lights hung between poles that leaned like they were one strong wind away from collapsing. A few old caravans were scattered across a clearing, and a portable cabin sat crooked at the edge. A cracked plastic Santa stood by the entrance, missing one eye and covered in dirt. Liam whispered, "This feels weird," and he was right, but I didn't want to break Ellie's excitement, so I told them maybe Santa was inside. The snow crunched under our boots as we walked toward the portable cabin, and I knocked on the metal door. No one answered. Then behind us a caravan door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was big, with a rough beard and a red tracksuit torn at the knees. His Santa hat was crumpled and burnt on one side like it had been too close to a fire. "You here for Santa?" he asked with a gravelly voice. Ellie nodded, but Liam moved closer until he was touching my arm. Before I could answer, the man waved for us to wait, then went back inside the caravan. Through the open door, I saw clutter everywhere, and a rifle leaning in the corner, and something in me twisted tight. When he came back, he was wearing a filthy Santa jacket over a stained t-shirt and told us to come inside the cabin. The smell hit me instantly, a sour, wet stink like old socks sealed up too long. Faded tinsel hung in clumps from the walls, and a string of flickering lights made the shadows jump. Santa sat heavily in a sagging chair and slapped his knee. "Come on, kids, tell Santa what you want." Ellie froze and Liam whispered, "Let's go. This is not right." I stepped in front of them, forcing a smile, and said we might need to head out, but before I could finish, his voice snapped sharp. "You think this is free? $50 or you don't leave." My heart jumped because his whole tone changed. He wasn't pretending anymore. I told him I did not have cash and we just wanted to head home, but he stood up and stepped toward us, saying, "You are not going anywhere until you pay." Shadows moved behind him, more people stepping out of the caravans, a teen holding a metal bar, a woman with stringy hair smoking a cigarette, and others I could not make out. "Hand over your purse," he said, and before I could react, a kid darted forward, grabbed it out of my hands and ran laughing back toward the caravans. The woman smirked, calling it a donation, and my instinct finally kicked in hard. I grabbed the kids and ran for the car, my hands shaking as I shoved them inside. The gang shouted behind us as I turned the key. The engine hesitated, and for a second I thought we were trapped, but then it roared to life. I reversed so fast the car skidded, and I forced us back toward the road, snow flying everywhere. As we got distance, I checked the mirror. The man in the Santa suit stood in the middle of the path, watching us, his head slightly tilted, like he was memorizing our faces, and the snow swallowed him as the darkness closed in. No one talked for miles until Ellie whispered, "Was that Santa?" Liam answered quietly, "The real Santa would never be like that." I told them, "No, sweetie, that was not Santa," but even after saying it, I couldn't shake the cold knot in my chest. Whoever those people were, they had set a trap out there in the woods on Christmas Eve, and we had walked right into it. Even now, I still think about how close we were to something much worse, and how one wrong move could have changed everything. It happened one Christmas when I was 12, and since that night, I have never looked at the holiday the same way. We lived in a tiny snow-covered town in Vermont that felt like a picture from a winter postcard, with narrow streets and warm houses and chimneys smoking into the cold air. Snow always softened every sound, until all you could hear was the quiet crunch of boots and a faint bell somewhere far away. My mom adored Christmas and would decorate the day after Thanksgiving with lights and garlands and candles in every single window. That year, she went all out with a huge tree that almost touched the ceiling, and the whole house smelled like pine needles and cinnamon. It felt magical until the magic cracked. On Christmas Eve, a fierce snowstorm slammed against our house, and the wind pushed so hard at the windows, it sounded like it wanted to get inside. Snow piled up fast until you could not see the end of the driveway. We had planned to go to the town caroling event, but the storm forced us to stay home, so it was just Mom and Dad and our dog Bandit and me sitting in the living room. The fire glowed, Mom gave us peppermint cocoa, and Bandit slept on the rug, warm and peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. We all froze. Nobody should have been out in weather like that. Dad frowned and went to the door, and I followed because I was too curious to stay behind. When he opened it, the wind screamed into the house, but there was nobody standing outside. Snow blew under the porch light, and the yard was empty except for one thing: a box, wrapped neatly in red paper with a green bow, and no name and no card. Dad brought it in, and we all stared at it like it might do something strange. Mom asked who would leave a gift in a storm, and Dad said maybe a neighbor, but something about it felt wrong to me. People bring gifts to watch your reaction, not drop them and vanish into a blizzard. I asked to open it, and Dad nodded, so I tore the paper. Inside was a plain box, and inside that was a ceramic cookie jar shaped like a head with green skin and bulging yellow eyes and a wide, jagged grin. It reminded me of the Grinch, but in a way that felt darker, like it had been made after a nightmare. The red hat on top was chipped, and it smelled dusty and old. Mom tried to smile and say it was funny, but I said what I really felt. that it was creepy. Its eyes seemed to follow you no matter where you stood. Inside were chocolate cookies that smelled amazing, and even though it felt wrong to eat one, I grabbed one anyway, and it tasted perfect. Still, the jar itself bothered me, so later that night I left it in the kitchen and went to bed. Bandit kept pacing and growling in the hallway, but I blamed the storm and eventually fell asleep. Sometime in the night, I woke up because something was moving downstairs. At first, I thought the house had shifted in the wind, but then I heard a soft dragging noise like something sliding across the floor. Bandit started barking with a deep, wild panic. My hands shook as I grabbed my flashlight and crept downstairs. Bandit stood at the kitchen doorway with his fur raised and his teeth showing. When I stepped inside, I froze. The cookie jar was on the floor with its lid off and crumbs scattered everywhere, and crouched beside it was something tall and thin, with greenish skin and long bony fingers. Its yellow eyes glowed through the dark, and when it turned toward me, its grin stretched too wide and too sharp. My chest tightened, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. It looked straight at me and said, "Merry Christmas," in a low, rough voice. I ran. I grabbed Bandit and sprinted up the stairs while heavy footsteps pounded behind me. I threw myself into my parents' room and slammed the door. I tried to explain everything, but Dad told me it was only a dream. When he checked the kitchen, nothing was out of place, and the jar was back on the counter like nothing had happened. But I knew what I saw. After that night, the jar moved on its own. Sometimes it would turn. Sometimes it would be in a different spot. Bandit refused to go near it, and at night I would hear faint giggling like someone hiding in a corner. We tried throwing the jar away twice, but each time it came back. No reason. No explanation. Just sitting on the counter waiting. Around New Year's it finally vanished, but I never forgot it. Even now, every Christmas Eve, I feel the same cold dread in my stomach, and I listen for that voice. Some gifts should never be opened, and some things never stay gone. This happened a few years ago during winter break when I was 22 and doing Uber Eats to make some money before classes started again. College lets out for a whole month, and Uber Eats is easy work. Since you do not have to deal with interviews or schedules, you just drive and deliver. That night it was snowing hard, but I did not really have the luxury of picking better days because I only had a short window to earn enough to get through the next semester. I borrowed my dad's pickup and started working. The snow must have kept a lot of other drivers home because I was getting non-stop orders. Big ones too, the kind that pay well. After about 3 hours, a new order came in from a drive-through spot, and even though the house was 20 minutes away, the tip made it worth it. Nothing felt off about it. It looked like a normal drop-off to a pretty nice neighborhood on the other side of the county. I had been nearby before, but never deep inside the neighborhood. By that time it was around 11 at night, and a thick layer of snow covered the road. I was getting tired, so I told myself this would be my last run before heading home. When I finally got to the house, I parked on the road because the driveway was buried under at least a foot of snow. I walked through it, getting my pants and shoes soaked, and noticed right away that all the windows were dark. There was a piece of paper taped to the front door too, with the word "Notice" at the top in bright red letters. It looked official, like something from the county, but before I could lean in to read more, I heard footsteps crunching behind me. I turned and saw a man coming from around the side of the garage. He had a buzz cut and a dirty jacket, and the way he walked made my stomach tighten. I tried to break the silence by saying I was just dropping off the order, but he did not answer or even slow down. When he got close, he held his hand out for the bag, so I gave it to him, expecting him to go inside. But he did not move. He just stood there in the snow staring, like he was waiting for something. After a few seconds, the whole situation hit me as wrong. Why was he outside with no lights on in the house? Why was he standing in the path instead of heading in with the food? "Have a good night, sir," I said, forcing a polite tone while stepping aside to walk past him. But the moment I moved, he jerked toward me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw his arms swing like he was trying to grab me. I stumbled back and faced him as he reached out again, saying, "Come with me," in this low, shaky voice that made my chest go cold. I backed away fast, my feet slipping in the snow while he kept coming after me, yelling for me to stop running. I finally got enough traction to sprint and somehow beat him back to the truck. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and floored it. As I pulled away, I looked in the mirror and saw him standing in the driveway, staring toward the road like he was trying to see where I was going. Once I got out of the neighborhood, I called the police and told them everything. Later that night, they told me the house was not owned by anyone right now, which matched the note on the door. They said the man was gone by the time they checked. I still do not know what he wanted or why he tried to get me to follow him, but that moment stuck with me. Now every time I pull up to a dark house with no lights on, I get that same uneasy feeling in my chest, wondering if someone else might be waiting in the snow. 4 years ago, I rented an Airbnb for the holidays because I was planning to visit my family for the week of Christmas and needed a place close to them. When I got there on December 20th, the house looked completely normal, just a regular place in a quiet neighborhood, nothing strange at all. I arrived around 6 that first evening, and since I was tired from the drive, I decided not to go anywhere. I stayed in, watched some TV, answered a few emails, and got ready for bed around 10. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to a noise downstairs. A few dull thumps against a wall, like something pushed or knocked lightly from inside the house. I was half asleep and did not even check the time. I figured the house was settling or the AC kicked on, something harmless, so I drifted back to sleep and did not think about it again in the morning. I spent the next day relaxing at the Airbnb until it was time to head out for dinner with my parents. I grabbed my bag, walked to the front door, opened it, and suddenly found myself face to face with a man standing right on the porch. He was so close that for a moment, neither of us said anything. I finally asked if I could help him, but he did not answer, and instead just nodded slowly and walked away without a single word. He went down the steps, crossed to the sidewalk, and kept walking until he disappeared from view. The whole thing felt wrong. I did not know how long he had been standing there, or why he did not knock or ring the doorbell. I locked up and drove to my parents' house, telling the story over dinner. Everyone agreed it was strange, but we changed the subject because we did not want to bring down the mood. Still, the rest of the night I kept thinking about my stuff back at the Airbnb and whether someone might be messing with the place. I left around 9 and got back 15 minutes later. I walked up to the front door, checked the porch, checked the side of the house, but everything looked untouched. Inside, I dropped my keys and bag on the kitchen counter, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Then I heard a sudden thump. It sounded exactly like the sound from the night before, but now that I was awake and downstairs, it was much louder and definitely coming from the left side of the house. I walked toward the noise, every step slow and careful. Before I could reach the doorway, another thump hit the other side of the wall, then a third one from a door right beside me. I jumped back, heart racing so fast I could feel it in my throat, and that was when I heard it. The slow, heavy sound of someone breathing on the other side of the door. I grabbed my keys and bolted outside as fast as I could. I got into my car, locked the doors, and called 911 while staring at the house and waiting for help. When the police arrived, they went in with flashlights while I stayed in my car. After a few minutes, they came back out and told me something that made my stomach flip. The door the person was behind was the garage door, and they said the marks on it showed someone had been trying to force the lock open from inside the garage to get into the house. They checked the garage and found a side door that led outside, a door I had not even realized existed, and that door had been left unlocked by whoever stayed there before me. Whoever was inside could have come and gone without me ever knowing. They could not say if the man I saw on the porch was the same person who tried to get inside, and honestly, I still do not know. All I do know is that I was asleep upstairs while someone stood directly below me trying to get into the house, and that feeling still sits heavy in my chest. I packed my things that night, and stayed in a hotel for the rest of the week. It has been 4 years since that Christmas, but every time I rent a place now, I check every closet, every door, and every corner, because once you hear someone breathing at a place where no one should be, you never forget it. I was 23 that year, stuck in that strange in-between stage where you are old enough to handle life on your own, but still trying to understand what being an adult is supposed to feel like, and that Christmas felt like the first time I was stepping into a new version of myself because my girlfriend Nicole agreed to meet my family for the first time. She was bright and warm, with this natural charm that made people relax around her. The kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and somehow make everyone feel lighter. My aunt hosted that year in her old farmhouse on the edge of town, and the whole place smelled like pine and cinnamon. The floorboards creaked when you stepped on them, the fireplace snapped in that cozy, uneven way, and the snow outside made the windows glow like we were inside a soft winter painting. Nicole fit in instantly. She laughed with my cousins, teased my uncle about his cooking, and listened to my aunt's long stories with real patience. I remember watching her from across the room, thinking maybe this was one of those quiet moments you look back on years later and realize your life was shifting without you noticing. We left close to midnight, driving through thick falling snow, the kind that makes the world feel smaller and slower. My old truck rattled when the heater tried to keep up with the cold, but Nicole just tucked her coat tighter and joked that I should have asked Santa for a new engine instead of pretending this one was fine. To save time, I decided to take the back road through the forest, a shortcut I had used since high school. Long, narrow, unlit, trees pressing in on both sides. Nicole gave me a quick look when I mentioned it, but she trusted me enough to stay calm, even though I could tell she was uneasy. Once we entered the forest, everything outside the windshield turned into darkness, and white streaks of snow swirling in the headlights. The trees seemed taller, shadows stacked on shadows. The air inside the truck felt too still. Nicole started humming a Christmas song under her breath, trying to fill the silence. Then, in one shocking blur, something ran across the road. I slammed the brakes, the truck skidding over the snow just long enough for my stomach to twist. The tires jerked, and we came to a rough stop, the snow drifting across the hood like smoke. Nicole grabbed the dash, her voice shaking as she asked what that was. I told her it was probably a deer, even though the shape that ran past the headlights had been upright, moving with this strange sense of purpose. I leaned forward, trying to catch another look, but the darkness swallowed everything. I rolled down the window even though the cold hit my face like needles, and I listened for anything, but the silence outside was heavy, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Then I saw it, standing at the edge of the tree line, tall, thin, wrapped in layers of old fur, like scraps pieced together into a coat. The part that froze me was the antlers. They were tied to its head with thick straps, twisted and uneven, like something from a nightmare. The face was pale, too pale, the skin stretched tight over bone, the mouth pulled into a strange, open grin, not human and not playful. The figure took one slow step forward, like it was testing us. Nicole whispered for me to lock the doors, her voice trembling. She reached over and hit the lock, and the click sounded way too loud in that quiet. I hit the gas. The tires spun and then caught, and we shot forward, the shape fading behind us. Nicole finally whispered that it was not running, it was stalking, and she was right. The way it tilted its head, the slow steps, it felt like something studying us, deciding what to do next. My truck sputtered again. The engine coughed, and then died completely. The silence that followed was cold and crushing. The forest suddenly felt too close, too alive. The branches overhead creaked, and the snow fell harder. I grabbed the flashlight from the glove box, stepped out into the freezing wind, and motioned for Nicole to stay close. We walked down the road, our footsteps crunching, the flashlight beam shaking in my hand. The trees seemed to lean in around us. Then a deep, low growl rolled out from the dark. Nicole froze, clutching my arm. I swung the light toward the sound and thought I saw something move behind a tree, but the beam caught only falling snow. Then the figure stepped onto the road again. Same twisted antlers, same patchwork fur, same unsettling grin. It tilted its head again, almost amused, and let out a sound that felt like a broken laugh, a dry rasp that made my stomach flip. "Run," I whispered, grabbing Nicole's hand, and we took off, sliding in the snow, trying not to fall. The footsteps behind us were heavy and steady, always just close enough to make our hearts race. When we saw a cabin through the trees, a faint, warm light flickering inside, it felt like a lifeline. We sprinted, threw ourselves inside, and pushed a table against the door. Nicole collapsed onto the floor, shaking, while I tried to stay quiet. The scratching started moments later. Long, slow, dragging sounds moving along the cabin walls, circling us like something pacing, deciding when to try again. The night dragged on inch by inch until the sky began to lighten and the noise finally stopped. When we stepped outside, the snow was perfectly smooth, untouched, like nothing had ever been there at all. Nicole and I made it home. We never took that road again, and honestly, we never talked about it deeply because some things feel too real once you say them out loud. But every Christmas Eve, when the world gets quiet and the snow starts to fall, I think about that moment in the woods, about that twisted grin and those heavy steps following just behind us, and I know in my gut that whatever that thing was, it is still out there somewhere, waiting in the dark, quiet trees for someone else to take the wrong road home. Last winter in early February, I was driving to my next DoorDash order and I was exhausted from being on the road for almost 4 hours straight. It was close to midnight and the sky had that heavy winter look, the kind that makes the whole world feel quiet and lonely. I told myself this delivery would be my last because the roads were covered in ice and snow, and I was getting way too tired to trust my focus. I was driving on this long, empty side road that connected two towns, and there was a 5-mile stretch with nothing at all around it. No houses or stores, just trees and cold wind. As I went down that stretch, a sudden wave of tiredness hit me hard and made me drift off for maybe 2 seconds, but 2 seconds was all it took. My car slid on a patch of ice and started drifting toward the side. By the time I snapped fully awake, I had already lost control. I tried to correct it, but the tires just skidded straight off the road and into a small ditch between the pavement and the woods. The snow softened the crash so I was not hurt, but the shock of it still made my hands shake. I tried to back up and get traction, but every tap of the gas only made the wheels dig deeper. At some point while I was sitting there trying to figure out what to do, I noticed headlights down the road. For a second, I thought it was someone who might stop to help me, but the car wasn't moving. It was just sitting there in the dark with its headlights pointed straight ahead. They were not close enough to reach me and not far enough to ignore me. Something about that made my stomach tighten. I pulled out my phone and called my dad because I knew he would still be awake, and he always knows what to do in situations like this. He said he would call roadside assistance and then drive over to wait with me. Hearing that made me breathe a little easier. When I looked back out the window a few seconds later, the headlights down the road were gone. Just gone. Either the car had driven off without me noticing, or they had turned the lights off and were still sitting there in the dark. For some reason, that second thought scared me more. I kept my eyes down the road, barely blinking, and the silence around me felt heavier by the second. Only the wind outside made any noise. After maybe 3 minutes, I saw a figure walking toward my car. He came from the same direction where the headlights had been. I watched as he made his way through the snow, slow and steady, until he reached a spot about 15 feet from the front of my car. Then he stopped. He stood there in the snow with a hood covering his face, not moving, not saying a word, just facing me like he was waiting for something. The way he stayed still like that sent a cold rush through my chest. I tapped the horn lightly a few times to let him know I could see him, but He did not react at all, just stood there, frozen. I grabbed my phone to call my dad again, and right as I did, the man turned around without a sound and walked away into the dark. I told my dad what I had just seen, and he said he was only a minute away. I stayed on the phone with him, and maybe 30 seconds later, headlights flipped on down the road and started moving toward my car. They pulled up across from me and shut off the lights. I could not see over the ditch, but I heard a door open and I felt my whole body stiffen. Before I could say anything, my dad's car swung in front of my view and he braked so hard the tires screeched. I heard him yell at someone and then saw a car speed away into the darkness. He ran to my window and said the man had been holding something in his hands, like he was about to break into my car. After that, everything went fine. Roadside assistance showed up, and the car barely had any damage at all. But even now I think about how close I was to being alone out there with that person and my stomach still drops. I do not know what he planned to do, but I know I am lucky I never had to find out. I have been home for Christmas more times than I can count, but this one never leaves me because it still makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. It happened on Christmas Eve, after I had taken the train back to my little hometown for the first time since finishing my last semester of college. Everything should have felt warm and familiar with snowy streets, soft lights, and that pine smell floating through the air, but from the moment I stepped onto the platform, something felt wrong in a quiet, heavy way. It was like the whole town was holding its breath, and I kept trying to convince myself it was just the season or maybe the memories. Because it had been 5 years since my brother Liam disappeared, and even though people stopped talking about it out loud, the ache never really went away. By the time I got home, the snow was falling harder and swirling under the porch light, just like it used to when we were kids. The house looked the same as always, a little old, a little drafty, the kind of place that creaks the moment the wind hits it. My parents hugged me and tried to smile, but the cheer felt thin and tired, because this time of year always reminded them of the son who was no longer there. After dinner, I went upstairs to my room, which looked exactly the same as when I was 17, with old posters and stacks of books and that faint, dusty smell I could never explain. But one thing was different. A small box sat on my desk wrapped in plain brown paper. I opened it slowly and froze. Inside was Liam's old journal. I had not seen it in years. On the inside cover, he had written for Elliot, "In case you need to remember." Remember what? Most of the journal was normal. Doodles, bits of poems, random thoughts, but the last few pages felt different. His handwriting looked shaky and uneven, and then I found the final entry. It said, "There is something in the woods. I hear it at night, tapping on the windows. Nobody believes me, but it is getting closer. Stay away from the creek." My heart started thudding because Liam had never mentioned anything like that before, and my parents always said he likely got lost during that stormy night, and that was all. But these words made it feel like he was scared of something real. I tried to shake it off, but that night I could not sleep. Every noise in the house felt louder, the radiator hissing the stairs, creaking the wind brushing against the glass. I turned off the light and pulled the blanket up to my chin, telling myself to stop imagining things. Then, just after midnight, I heard it alight, tapping on my window. My whole body went still. I told myself it was just the branch of the old tree, but the rhythm felt wrong, too slow, too intentional, like someone was trying to get my attention. I forced myself out of bed and stepped toward the window. The glass was frosted, but I could still see the backyard. It looked empty until my eyes shifted to the tree line, and then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the woods, completely still, staring up at my window. The second I realized I was looking at a person, the house alarm went off so loud I stumbled backward. My dad rushed in with his shotgun, demanding to know what happened, and I pointed at the window, shaking. He looked but said he could not see anything. He checked the yard and came back saying it must have been an animal, but I knew what I saw and it was no animal. The next morning he checked the security footage, and when he called me over, his face looked drained. On the screen was exactly what I saw. A person standing at the tree line watching the house, then slowly moving closer until they were right under my window looking up at the camera. Then the clip cut out. We did not talk about it after that. What was there to say? As the storm got worse, the power kept flickering, and we all stayed together in the living room with candles, trying to act like everything was fine. But every gust of wind made me jump, and every shadow looked wrong. Then we heard footsteps outside, steady crunches in the snow moving toward the porch. Dad grabbed the shotgun and opened the door just enough to look out. The freezing air swept in, and for a moment we heard nothing but the storm. Then we saw them. A long trail of footprints leading from the woods to the porch and then back again, like someone had paced there for a long time. I did not sleep at all that night. I sat in my room holding Liam's journal, reading his last words again and again. Whatever had taken him had not disappeared, and now it felt like it wanted me. It has been so many years since this Christmas thing first started that I have lost track of time. But every year it feels the same, like a loop we are forced into rather than a tradition we chose. The people change, the house changes, even the decorations change, but the night itself stays the same in a way that feels heavy on your chest. This year we gathered at Rachel's place, just like always. She has always been the one who insists on hosting. The strange part is that out of everyone, she is the one who takes it the least seriously. She laughs and calls it spooky fun every year, brushing things off with a smile. I do not know if she really believes that, or if she is pretending, but there is a part of me that wishes I could believe it too. The worst part was realizing that this year, I was the only one who seemed tense enough to feel the air change as the clock crept toward midnight. 1 hour to go until things usually begin, and John was already checking the front door again, twisting the knob as if it might slip out of his hands. He does this every year, even though it has never once been unlocked. I was at the kitchen table with a glass of water in my hand, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. Water was the only thing I could manage to drink tonight, because there was no way I would let my mind get foggy. Not on this night. I kept glancing toward the living room where everyone was gathered, trying to look relaxed. Mel was on the couch, taking long, slow breaths and sinking deeper into the cushions. Ben kept pacing around the room, tapping his foot against the hardwood, like he was trying to shake the nerves off. Rachel was scrolling through her phone like she could drown out the fear by ignoring it. I tried to distract myself, but my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway where the closet stood. The door had been removed months ago, and now leaned against the wall like a warning sign. Above it hung that tiny piece of mistletoe. I hated looking at it. It always looked cute and harmless from a distance. But we all knew what it meant, and none of us wanted to walk anywhere near it. My stomach tightened as the same familiar dread crawled up my spine, the kind of feeling that makes you straighten your back without thinking, like your body knows something you do not. The early years were small things like the lights blinking or the closet opening an inch on its own. But then the tone of the night changed and the small things became more like warnings rather than random mistakes. I remember the first time I saw one of the shapes step out of the darkness, and it felt like my whole body locked up. After that, we all knew something had attached itself to this night, and none of us could pretend otherwise. "Everything locked?" Ben asked quietly, and John nodded without turning his head. "We just wait," he whispered. "Waiting is always the part that eats you alive." The fire crackled in the living room. The wind pressed lightly against the windows, and still the silence felt wrong. You can always tell when things are about to shift. Then John whispered, "Here we go," and the air temperature dropped instantly, like something cold swept across the floor and through our clothes and straight into our bones. None of us spoke. We all knew what that cold meant. Something was here. Then, from the open frame of the closet, something stepped forward. It looked human at first, but the longer you stared, the more your eyes began to tell you it was not. Its movements were slow and stiff, like it was trying to remember how to use its own body. Its head tilted slightly to one side, as if listening to something only it could hear. The room felt smaller as it stood there. No one breathed. Mel muttered, "Why does it always start like this?" But none of us answered. Then it moved too fast for any of us to react, and struck the invisible space under the mistletoe like it hit a wall. It tried again and again, each impact sounding heavier than the last. But after one final push, the shape faded into nothing, like mist pulled away by the wind. The room stayed cold and the quiet got thicker. Then the second one appeared in the doorway. This one was taller, its shape uneven, like parts of it did not belong together. Its arms hung low and its head turned slowly toward us. The smile stretched across its face was not angry but empty, in a way that made my stomach twist. It stepped forward, dragging something across the floor, a faint scraping sound that made my skin crawl. Ben moved without thinking, stepping back, but the thing reacted instantly, pushing against the doorway like it needed to force its way in. The sound of the frame straining under the pressure made all of us freeze. It pushed harder until it slipped through and stumbled into the room. The cold air thickened until it felt hard to breathe. The smell that followed it was not rot, but something stale and old, like a place sealed for too long. "Why is it not stopping?" Rachel whispered, her voice shaking. None of us knew. Then, the entire house shook as the closet behind us snapped open, and something like a mass of moving branches surged from inside, sweeping across the walls and floor. One wrapped around Rachel's ankle and pulled. She screamed for us to help, but the sound was swallowed by the pressure in the room. We rushed to grab her, but the branches moved faster, pulling her toward the open closet. Her scream faded as the cold swallowed the sound, and even though there was no violence, nothing visible, nothing graphic, the terror was in the way she vanished, as if the house itself breathed her in. We stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, until the branches slid back into the closet, and the room became silent again. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then the cold drifted through the house a second time, and the clock struck midnight. We ran to the window at the same time, and that was when we saw Rachel's car slowly rolling down the driveway. She was in the driver's seat, her face pale, her eyes empty, staring straight ahead like she was listening to something none of us could hear. She did not stop, she did not turn. She just kept driving into the darkness until the taillights vanished behind the trees. And standing there watching the empty road, I realized the nightmare was not ending. It was beginning again, just like it always does.